On September 11, 2001, the world witnessed one of the most horrifying scenes ever broadcast on live television. A group of militant Islamic terrorists seeking retribution for the United States' support of Saudi Arabia and Israel, attacks on Muslims in the Middle East, and sanctions against Iraq, hijacked 4 planes and crashed them into the World Trade Center buildings, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. At least, that's one version of the story. Within just hours of the attacks, someone suggested in an internet chat room that it appeared like a controlled demolition. Within a week, the idea that it was an inside job was published in the French newspaper Le Monde. Within 6 months, people around the world were ardently convinced that it was the work of the CIA, that the US had done it to itself to justify aggression in the Middle East. Yikes. How do we get here? How do we all look at the same situation, the same evidence, the same facts, and come up with such divergent ideas? More importantly, when you encounter someone who believes in a conspiracy theory like this, when you talk with someone who believes something you know to be false, how do you change their mind? For many, the answer is to bring facts. It's about being prepared with research and studies and history so that we can prove that we're right, beating our opponent in a debate, and forcing them to accept our position. A strategy that many of us employ, that we all think will work, but we all know deep down, from experience, just doesn't. For better or for worse, people are not convinced by facts. They don't change their minds because they lose an argument, are humiliated or alienated. It just doesn't work. But people do change their minds. One of the most famous 9/11 conspiracy theorists, in fact, admitted that he was wrong. There is something else that gets through to people. There's something else that influences what we think and what we believe to be true, and my guess is that most of us are not aware of it. Unless we understand what this is, each and every one of us will be susceptible to manipulation by others and will never be effective at changing anyone else's minds. I warn you, this is a long one, but it's worth it. Let's start with the man who changed his mind about the 9/11 conspiracy. In 2012, BBC aired a miniseries called Conspiracy Road Trip. Each episode, the host would gather a handful of people who were convinced of some outlandish belief and take them on a fact-finding tour to see how they reacted to expert testimonies to the contrary. Predictably, guests rarely changed their opinions, but that was sort of the entertainment of all. When presented with new evidence, they explained away what they had seen and doubled down on their theories. A notable exception to this, though, was the episode on the 9/11 attacks, which concluded with one guest, Charlie Veitch, admitting that he was wrong. He needed to accept that the evidence contradicted his theory. So what did it for him, we wonder? Was it the demolition expert explaining how it would have been impossible to plant and conceal a necessary amount of explosives to take down the towers? Or the flight simulator that showed how easy it would have been to fly a plane into a building? Maybe it was the explanation of how debris scatters and disintegrates. No doubt all of these things had some effect on him, but none of them was significant enough on its own to convince him to disavow his stance. In the end, the most influential factor, what lifted the veil from his eyes and forced him to accept the evidence, was something that had nothing to do with the conspiracy theory itself. It was his relationship to the other conspiracy theorists. You see, at one point in the episode, the guests met with people who had lost loved ones in the attacks. Charlie listened to a widow's story with sadness, hugged this woman as she cried. He believed in a conspiracy theory, yes, but he wasn't a monster, he thought. He felt empathy for her, as he expected everyone should. But his fellow truthers didn't. When they got back to the hotel, they actually made fun of her. Some thought that she had been brainwashed by the FBI. One went further to say that she was a hired actress, a plant by the BBC to trick them. Just absolutely disgusting. It was in this moment that something snapped inside of Charlie. He realized that the people around him, the ones that believed what he believed, the ones that he held on to as his community of support, were people that he didn't want to be associated with. Now, obviously, the human mind is complicated, and it's impossible to pinpoint the exact moment or reason why we change our minds, but I think that Charlie's story teaches us something fundamental about how we come to believe or not believe something. Our beliefs are socially influenced. While facts and evidence are obviously important in determining what we think is true, this process never occurs in a vacuum. We want to be accepted for what we believe and be surrounded by others who affirm us. That just makes sense. For those who fall for conspiracy theories, there is often initial anxiety and questioning of the facts, sure, but it grows and becomes rooted in someone because they find affirmation in people they want to be in community with. It's a thought process that is motivated as much, if not more, by emotion and a sense of belonging as it is evidence. I have this question, and here is a person that I like, think is trustworthy, and want to be around that has an answer, so yeah, let me listen to what they have to say. And so what we see in the case of someone like Charlie is that it's not the evidence alone that convinces someone of a theory, and thus it is not the evidence alone that can break someone of it. It's the relationships. It's looking around and realizing that he didn't trust the people anymore, that he didn't want to be associated with them anymore, that gave him the freedom to ask, do I actually believe this? What I find particularly unsettling about Charlie's story is that it's not just the story of a conspiracy theorist, it's the story of humanity. I see myself in his experience. Now, I like to think of myself as a pretty intelligent, adaptable, free-thinking guy. I can see things from other people's perspectives, entertain new evidence, even change my mind when I see that I'm wrong. The idea that I could be influenced by bias is not something that I take kindly to, until I realize that there are plenty of decisions in my life, plenty of things that I like or don't like, accept or deny, that are based in large part on what people around me think. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was listening to some baseball commentary, and this guy I couldn't stand starts speaking. I think to myself, ugh, this guy, what an idiot. I listened to him for a bit, and it turns out he says something pretty intelligent. I hear him speak a couple more times over the next couple months and realize, this guy isn't that bad. Not the best for sure, but he's fine. Why did I think he was so terrible all these years? And then I remember, growing up, my dad couldn't stand him. He used to complain that he didn't know what he was talking about, made fun of the things he said. And so, at 10 years old, and for 20 plus years after, I implicitly agreed. Now, for all I know, he could have gotten better and isn't the same announcer as he was 20 years ago, or maybe I'm just wrong now and my dad's still right, he's terrible. But you see my point. When someone we like and trust says something, that has an effect on us. Without our even knowing it, we might find ourselves influenced, not by pure reason, not by evidence alone, but by a desire to be in community with other people. Think about how often we do this. It starts with kids as we look up to our parents, but it continues with our friends, our careers, our news networks, our religious leaders. Think about the sports teams we like, the interests we have, our political stances, our opinions about every little thing. When someone we like and trust says something, we are far more likely to agree with them without verifying what they say or critically questioning our own beliefs. As silly as it may sound, celebrity endorsements do actually work on a subconscious level, and it works both ways. How many times in my life I found myself having an opinion of something, not because of the thing itself, but because people I didn't like have an opinion of it. It was as if I said in my mind, well, that person, who I don't trust at all, likes it, so I probably won't. I look at the people hate things like Taylor Swift, pumpkin spice, the Latin Mass, Boston sports teams, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There are a lot of people in this world that have very strong and negative opinions about each of these things, and maybe that's warranted. But I wonder, if you're a person who really hates one of these things, how much of it is because of the actual thing itself, and how much of it is because of your discomfort with the type of person that likes these things? Whether we want to admit it or not, there is a social dimension to our sense of truth. Drawing us one way or another isn't always our evaluation of the facts, but how we feel about its proponents. The fact of the matter is that none of us is a purely objective, bias-free thinker. We are greatly influenced, not just by the message, but by the messenger. When we trust the person who introduces an idea to us, we are more likely to accept it. When we don't trust them, we are more likely to question it. This is unsettling for sure, but it also presents us with two great opportunities if we're willing to do some soul searching. While the realization that we might be a bit biased is far from encouraging, it does offer us a fairly easy solution to one of the world's biggest problems, namely our inability to communicate effectively with one another. Why don't people accept truth when it's presented to them, and what can we do about it? The first answer, unfortunately, requires that we admit that sometimes we are the ones who refuse to accept the truth. Whether it's because the people we trust espouse untruths or because our enemies actually are right, there are times we should all be able to admit that we have ended up on the wrong side of things for irrational reasons. Can we admit that? Can we be honest enough with ourselves, with our feelings towards another, to say, the only reason I really like that is because my best friend likes it? Say, the only reason I don't like this is because the other political party supports it. Trust me when I say that this is no easy task. It is difficult to untangle our feelings for things and relationships with people. Our life isn't so neatly compartmentalized, objectively ordered in every way. How can you possibly separate your feelings for loved ones with something you've held for decades? Because it's not simply that you like something because they like it. Admitting that you don't like something that your loved one does could cause strain on the relationship. Taking a stance against a friend, stepping outside of a group, potentially standing alone by your convictions regardless of what anyone thinks, is a huge social risk. There's a reason why we have this bias in the first place. We want to be accepted. We want to feel like a part of someone else's life, even if it doesn't make sense, even if the facts don't add up. And so we have to ask ourselves, do I have the courage to stand up for what I believe, even if others don't? Am I willing to seek the truth, even if that separates me from my friends, even if that puts me in league with people I don't like? That's tough stuff. Tough stuff for sure. But if we claim to be a people who want the truth, what other choice do we have? Unless we recognize that we can be biased, that our emotion influences our decisions, we will always be a people resistant to truth, easily manipulated by others. Of course, we know that the problem doesn't always lie within us. We encounter people all the time who simply won't listen to what we have to say, that are stuck in their own ways, and there's nothing you can ever do to change their mind. What do we do when the problem is other people? For me, it's back to Charlie Veitch. Here was a man who believed that 9/11 was an inside job. He was presented with evidence for years and yet held to his beliefs. How many of us would have met him along the way, would have dismissed him as lost, as crazy, as beyond convincing? And yet look what happened. He changed his mind. Not because someone finally articulated the argument in a perfect way, not because he was logically defeated, but because the people he trusted began to shift. What changed wasn't the facts he was hearing, it was his relationship with the people he was speaking to. Sometimes the problem isn't so much what we're saying as it is the fact that we're the ones saying it. For better or for worse, there are people in this world that don't like you or me, don't trust what we have to say, and so it doesn't matter what we say or how we say it, they are not going to be convinced. If this is the case, our answer cannot be to double down on facts. It cannot be to work extra hard to show them that they're wrong and we're right. The problem isn't with the message, it's with the messenger. And so if we're ever going to make a difference, ever going to have any hope at all of them listening to us, we need to put our energy in building the relationship. Why is it that this person doesn't trust me? What is it about me, what I say and do, what I stand for, who I associate with, that leaves someone cautious of what I have to say? Now, there's no doubt that some of this is outside of our control, and we shouldn't go around changing everything about who we are just so that people will like us. But I can guarantee you that there is something we could do better. I guarantee you that we could be attentive to the way we present ourselves to others, the way that we talk to the people we disagree with, the way that we either welcome or do not welcome people into our lives. In Pope Paul VI's letter Evangelii Nunciando, proclaiming the gospel, the Pope captures this idea perfectly. He says modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers, and if he does listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses. In other words, people are not convinced by what you say, they're convinced by who you are. People are not convinced by what you say, they're convinced by who you are. And so if we want to change someone's mind, if we want to share the truth that we've found, something that all Christians should want to do, the first and most important thing that we must do is form a relationship, is gain trust, is show the person in front of us that we are on the same team and care about the same things that they care about. Too many important conversations have been shut down even before they started because one person offended the other. Too many important lessons have been missed because the one speaking didn't respect the one they were speaking to. Too many opportunities for evangelization have been lost because the evangelist didn't present themselves as a person worth following. We have got to take this more seriously. In our interactions online, in the way we present ourselves to the wider society. If people view us as fake, unfriendly, untrustworthy, heartless, interested in nothing but money, interested in nothing but fame, whatever it is, they are not going to listen to us no matter what we have to say. If you want to change someone's mind, change the way that they perceive you. I tell you, even if someone believes in a conspiracy theory with absolutely no basis, if they know that you respect them, if they know that you are trustworthy and someone that they want to be like, the truth will ultimately prevail.